I was here right after the tripod fire. You remember the tripod burn? I think it was maybe '06 that the tripod burned about 200,000 acres north of Winthrop. And if you didn't know this, then I'm going to tell you now because it is the key to finding lots of morels. The spring following a forest fire in these montane woodlands of the American West, that is the time to look for morels. We often have huge flushes after these fires. So we're out there, picking morels, and we think we're doing pretty good. We've got our little woven Guatemalan baskets, traipsing around with like 5 pounds or whatever of morels. And we come into a clearing, and here are these 2 guys, and they're each wearing packs towering over their heads that are just filled with morels. And I'm going to guess that they each had about 80 pounds. And I looked at them, and they looked at us, and not a word was said. And then they just sort of turned on their heels and disappeared off the timber like a Bigfoot sighting. And that was when I decided that I was going to write this book, The Mushroom Hunters, that I was going to worm my way into this subculture. The guys who are doing this professionally, like this character in the back, you can't make out his features, he's sort of indistinct, fuzzy in the background there. They're traveling around the Pacific Northwest and living an itinerant existence, following the mushroom flushes, really week to week, month to month, throughout the year. And in the greater Pacific Northwest, you can actually be a professional mushroom hunter full time because somewhere mushrooms are popping 12 months out of the year. So this mushroom right here probably weighed about 5 pounds. And I'm gonna say that Jeff probably got about $25 for that mushroom. $5 a pound, $25. And the buyer who bought it from him probably turned around and sold it to a restaurant for $50. So just to give you a sense of the scale. There are a lot of mushroom hunting is just scouting. Just being in the woods, continually looking for new patches. It was just amazing being with these guys and being out in the woods with people who work in the woods for a living and just seeing the woods through their eyes. And I do a lot of backpacking and biking, and I love spending time in the outdoors, and I love nature. But when you've got to find large quantities of mushrooms on a daily basis, it makes you look at everything just in a slightly different way. You're really paying attention because just little nuances in the woods can make the difference between whether you're going to have enough gas money to make the next day's trip or not. I'm interested in these characters and how they're making a living and what they have to do to survive, and just these people as people, round people, not cardboard cutouts. And so it's kind of like almost writing a novel. I use the same sort of toolkit that a novelist uses. And so one of the most important things to have is some tension, right? Some narrative tension. Well, right here we have the tension. So built into this is this economic tension between the pickers and the buyers. This picture was taken in Raymond, Washington. Now every fall, Jeremy will drive a few times a week from Seattle, the 2.5 to 3 hours, out to Raymond just to buy mushrooms from all the pickers who live out there. And within 5 minutes of Jeremy arriving at the house, there will be 30 pickers lined up at the back door with their baskets overflowing with porcini and lobsters and chanterelles to be graded by the buyer, and then they get paid in cash. And he will fill up his 1990 Astro van with 2,000 pounds of mushrooms, which that he will then drive back to Seattle. Big fires up in Tok this year. Tok is a traditional morel producer. There's always fires up in Tok. But they're being whitewater rafted out. They're being helicoptered out. So I showed you some pictures earlier of Jeremy setting up his buy stand in a private home. And by the way, Sang, who owned that home, would get paid a commission for that. But, when it's burn morel time, Jeremy's just driving around the West, and he's got to join the throngs right out there on a Forest Service road somewhere and put out his little sandwich board, mushroom buyer, and compete with all the other buyers who are in town. And on this particular day, there were 7 other buyers, and Jeremy blows into town, and he immediately raises the price $2. Okay, all the pickers showed up at his booth that night, and then some of the other buyers we know. It's a little bit of the Wild West out there. You know, largest all-cash business in the country. This is the top of Blewett Pass, and you can see the burn just right there. Well, so many pickers converged on this fire that it actually became a problem. The pickers they couldn't pick enough mushrooms. These guys are they're hoping to pick 100 pounds a day. There was so much competition that they were really just getting a couple of buckets. Here's the buyer and his wife looking at a basket there. And there they are tending the morels. Just putting them on screens, it's 100 degrees. You know, they're air drying them. They're drying 24 hours. And there's a sense of scale there. These are just getting bagged up and flown over to Europe.